Hello, everybody. This is Jacob from Pick Management Sports Investment Services, found only at DFSClub.com. Today, we have a really special guest, pro sports bettor and betting journalist, the UK's Nigel Seeley. Nigel, how are you, sir?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me on. Looking forward to doing this slightly regularly over the next few months. So it's the first of many, I hope. So thanks very much. And thanks for everyone who's followed me in America and everyone who's got involved in my services. And long may our success continue.
Yeah, absolutely. So, can you tell us a little about your background, how you initially became in betting and soccer betting and all that?
Well, I mean, I've always been involved in a family that is involved in sports betting and betting in this country. And my father was a bookmaker. He was the manager of the trading office in Ladbrokes, which is the biggest bookmaker in the UK at the time,
Absolutely.
in the 70s and the 80s. And I worked there as a Saturday boy at 15, collecting all the bets, monitoring all the betting action, and helping my dad. And we had a big call centre of hundreds and hundreds of call operators. Because in those days you couldn't use the internet, so everyone was calling through with their wages, and it was madness at the time. I mean, the turnover and the masses, and it sort of got me involved in it from a young age. As a young kid, I always remember going to the racetrack with my dad, and we used to go to as a family to some of the bigger meetings at Kempton, which is a big horse race meeting in England. Over the Christmas period, we used to go there, and as a child on Boxing Day, and it was always something I knew that I had an interest in. I always liked a flutter with my uncles when I used to go to my grandmother's house, and we used to always put in 10 pence or like a nickel into a bet and have one horse, whichever won. And I usually used to win more often than I lost against my uncles when I was 10 years old. So I knew I may be quite good at this thing. So that was what happens. And then I was doing my studies at school, and I was a year into my studies, and I was looking for a job, and I didn't really know what to do at 17 years of age. And it was 1990, and in 1990, sports betting in the UK really exploded. It was the time that football betting really took off, and it was challenging horse racing. At those days, horse racing was 80% of turnover in the UK was on horse racing, and football was about a 5% chance, because the bookmakers in this country used to limit you to 3 teams or 5 teams. You weren't allowed to have a single. There's only parlays of 3 or 5 sides. So, but then they sort of live television came in, and there was a lot more soccer on the television. There was a younger audience that wanted to get involved in sports betting. And the only newspaper in the UK still now that is solely focused on gambling is called the Racing Post. And there was a job there in 1990 as an office junior on the sports betting division, which was going to open up in 1990. And I went and met the editor, and we hit it off instantly. I went with a little book of stats. I knew every single Premier League goal scorer. It wasn't the Premier League, and it was the old First Division. I knew every goal scorer. I knew all the results, and it was like I just had to bamboozle him with statistics, and he offered me the job there and then, and I was on £5,000 a year, and I couldn't believe my luck. I thought this was the opportunity I had, and I stayed there for 7 years. And in those 7 years, I learned so much from people. And the sports editor is a guy called Derek McGovern, and I put him down as the biggest inspiration I ever had in my life. He was a guy who was extremely funny, great humour, and just very good at his job. And I looked at him as a father figure, and it really gave me an opportunity to learn about sports betting. And I was right in it from the beginning. And we had good relationships with bookmakers. I had tickets to go to all the football matches, which was envy of my friends, and I learnt so much. And that took me up to 1997, and I started off at 17 as the youngest person in the newspaper. And when I left in 1997, I was still the youngest person in the newspaper. So it was a fascinating ride and a great experience for a young guy. And then my path went into bookmaking, and I become a bookie working for different bookmakers. But that was what really got me into my first place. My father and my first job at the Racing Post.
Great. We are here with Nigel Seeley, pro soccer bettor journalist. It's funny you say all that. I feel that your path is very similar. Right, I'm literally in the middle of going through that right now. I'm actually headed to Costa Rica for 2 months to launch a new sports book coming up. I'm trying to break in the door in Vegas. I've been trying to do that forever. So it's good to hear, and that's part of the reason why we wanted you on, so you can explain how you came up, because I know you're a lifelong bettor. I grew up in a betting family too. I remember my grandfather running high stakes pinochle games in the basement while my grandma was making matzo ball soup for all of us, and it was really great. So since you've been involved in the UK betting market for so long, and now you've crossed over to the American markets and whatnot, what would you say is the biggest differences between the UK market and America? Some of the restrictions on the US that there aren't in the UK, and how people are saying we'll get to that one day, we'll get to that one day, with props and being able to bet pretty much anything you want. So what would you say those biggest differences are that you're seeing right now?
Well, I think the technology we have here at the moment is is light years ahead of the American market. But the European influence from the firms over here, the Bet365s, the William Hills, the Paddy Power, the Betfairs, are all appearing in Vegas now. So the technology is coming. You'll have apps that we have here that would allow you to bet on anything. I think the biggest difference is that we restrict winners in this country. So if you're a pro bettor and you make money, and we make on our betting services I provide, we make about 6% return of investment on soccer. It's impossible to get a bet on in this country. So they restrict you, and I think the American market will not be able to understand that. When the European, there's going to be very, very good, massive positives for you in terms of the European influence that's going to happen. You're going to have so many opportunities to bet on so many new things, which is going to open so many doors. And for someone like me, who provides information on the sports that you've not really, or not American sports, it's fantastic for me as a business operation. But for you, I think what looks so good is going to come with a problem, and the problem will be, if you're successful, you're not going to be able to wager to the size that you expect. I mean, the bookmakers in Vegas go to strip the sports, but you can stand there with $100,000 and have to bet on the Super Bowl if you wanted to do that. That won't happen when it comes in. They'll restrict winners, and I think you'll find. I think at the beginning, when the sports books open, there'll be a lot of pro bettors who are over in Europe, who can't get a wager on, will suddenly move to the East Coast and rent property just to get wagers on until the restrictions come in, because it's so much beneficial for them. So I think that's one positive and also a negative. The other thing is, I think that you have and I don't mean this in any disrespect. The punters in England, the gamblers and bettors in England, have so much information and technology, and there's so many people out there who are good information. There's a lot of people on Twitter. There's a lot of people like myself. So there's so many good stuff that I think the UK market is a little bit more. It's a little bit more savvy in terms of, they don't necessarily bet with their heart, they bet with their head rather than their heart. And I think what I found with a lot of American guys who I spoke to, that they're so passionate about where they're from. One state is as big as the whole of England. So it's,
Sure.
their passion and their loyalty to their home side is something they've got to have to. If you want to be a pro bettor, you've got no loyalty to anybody. The only loyalty you have is to your bank balance. And I think that's one thing that I find with the American guys, that they're so passionate about their team, and they love it, and they will bet them and without even thinking about any problems. And I think that's going to have to change. They have to change very quickly if you want to be successful.
Sure. When it comes to some of the things you can bet in the UK and not the US, I live in Connecticut. We don't have betting in Connecticut. Not yet. They're running the bill supposedly next week to approve it. But when I have a big bet, I have to drive 90 minutes, sometimes more, to be able to put a bet in. That's part of the reason I play offshore. So I'm a little bit more familiar with the things that you can bet in the UK that you can't bet in the US. I play with one of our sponsors, Top Notch Odds. It's a good place, and it's very similar to how things are set up in the UK. There's actually the iGaming conference going on right now in London, that a few of my coworkers are at, which is all the upcoming technologies in sports betting. And there's some really cool stuff coming on that the UK already has, and just the amount of things that you can bet. And some of the information I get from European-based websites. I mean, for soccer, that's where I go. It's very hard to find good information in the US on soccer. So you have to really dig in and look for sites in Europe to be able to handicap better. So I'm always trying to get my buddies to watch Premier League. It's my favorite league. It's exciting. It's great. Is the Premier League your favorite league? And if so, why?
It's not. It's not at all. I think the Premier League. We say it's the most exciting league in the world. We say it's the most. The story is over the years. It's the most competitive league in the world. It truly isn't. I mean, Liverpool are 22 points clear at the table. They could win the title at the end of February. That's not competitive. That's not competitive at all. I think the Spanish league. The top four in Spain: Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, quality sides. I think that's a very, very competitive league. I think that the Italian league, obviously Juventus have been superb over the years, but that's now becoming a little bit more competitive. My favourite division, where I make most of my money and where the people who subscribe to my services make most money on soccer, is in the lower leagues. The Championship, League One, League Two. I think our record in League One is just the strike rate is phenomenal, and the reason why is because I watch a lot more of those leagues. I mean, I have a son who's 15, and pretty much every weekend we're at a game. And I was a dad that didn't want him to go to the Emirates to watch Arsenal and have a nice ice cold Coke, a nice sandwich, and a nice 3-course meal at half time. I wanted him out in the cold with 400 people, freezing, watching a game at League Two with. Because I think that's what football should be about. Grassroots football isn't about £150 a ticket to go and watch the new Tottenham Stadium. It's about your local club where it's £7 to go in and watch the game and have a hot cup of tea. So we pretty much go to every single game. And what I've learned in the two things I've really learned is that in the Premier League, if Manchester City play Arsenal, Manchester City play, say, Aston Villa, for example. Manchester City could rest 5 players, and the 5 players coming in make no difference. In League One or League Two, if they have a player, the centre forward is injured, or the captain's injured, or the goalkeeper's injured, the player coming in is usually an 18-year-old kid who's got no experience. And the bookmakers, because there's no volume and there's not really much bet on it, they don't really change the odds so much. If Aguero doesn't play for Manchester City, the odds change hugely. But the thing is, the player coming in is Gabriel Jesus, who's a Brazilian international centre forward. It's not like it is in the lower leagues. So I find that the lower leagues, and when I watch the lower leagues, I find that really, if you're in League Two or even lower than League Two, there's no real home advantage. I've said this before in Beeson. I mean, if you've got a game, the attendance is 1,200 people. That's no different, and the home advantage and the away advantage. And the bookmakers sometimes put the home advantage into too much. There's no gap between probably 10 teams in League Two. You can put a cigarette paper between a lot of them. Anyone could beat anyone on a day. So I think the Premier League now has got 3 mini leagues. I'm going back to the point of the Premier League. You've got the top 5 or 6 who week in, week out will beat the bottom side. You have a middle table from, say, and you have the 6 at the bottom of the table. And when they play the big teams now, they rest their players. The teams at the bottom of the table, like a team like, say, for example, we'll call Aston Villa again. If they went to Manchester City, they would probably put out a reserve team at Manchester City because the following week they could be playing at home to Norwich, and that game is much more important. So the days of shocks in the Premier League are long gone. I think we may have had maybe 1 or 2 big shocks over the years, but really, I mean, you're never going to see a Leicester win the Premier League again. That's never going to happen. And you're never going to, you week in, week out. It's funny. The top 4 or 5 are getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And eventually in time, they'll pull away. But eventually in time, what will happen is there'll be a European Super League. That will happen. But because of Brexit, I doubt whether many of our teams will be invited. But there you go.
Sure. We are here with soccer betting phenom and betting journalist Nigel Seeley. Nigel, you recently went on a run of about 30 days a month without losing a game. Can you tell us either your biggest win or biggest loss?
Well, I mean, that run was we had a lot of draws in that run. We didn't actually win every way.
Yeah.
One of our selections got beat, so we didn't win. But I mean, we're on a very good run at the moment. I mean, we're on a phenomenal run on the tennis. I mean, the tennis run that we're on this season, I think tennis is probably the sport that I would consider I make most money on, rather than soccer. But I'm a sports bettor: soccer, tennis, and golf. But tennis, if someone said to me, Nigel, what would I follow you on? Tennis would be my sport. My biggest ever win as an odds as a bet, I backed Danny Willett to win the US Masters, 66-1. Had a £200 each way on him, so I won about £14,000.
Yeah.
I won. I don't really play a lot of big odds because I could probably count on one hand the number of really big price winners I've had, because future betting is really not what I do. I mean, I've had a couple of golf successes. I mean, I had a 66-1 second or third. Mine is what I do is constant fee. It's a constant. It's a return every week, a return every month. And I just play a lot. Where I really specialise in is I like even money shots, especially on tennis, and even money shots in football matches. Anything around the even money mark, or say plus 10. If I would bet them because I make them the favourite. So on a tennis match, there may be 128 games in the first round of a Grand Slam. I'd probably pay 4 matches, but it's always a player that's one plus $1.10 that should be minus money, and because I think I've got 7% in my favour. And so I was that's where I will specialise in more match bets. So really, I couldn't tell you a huge amount of winning big odds runs, but consistently week in and week out. I mean,
that 66-1 will do it.
That'll do that. Yeah, that'll do. But the thing is, it's like the way I look at what I do. It's like someone saying to me, if we toss a coin, I'll give you $7. Do you give me 5? If you get it right. And that's the little edge I think I have. I think I have that little edge all the time. Now, obviously, he can hit heads 10 times on the spin, but if we toss that coin 10,000 times, I'd make money. And that's what I think. I think I've just got that tiny little edge on the value. And pretty much now with the following that we have, not my following in Europe is not big. I mean, back in 5 or 6 years ago, I did a lot of TV work. I did a lot of radio work, and I had a lot of following. But the following in America now is so strong that we have so many people who follow us now that our price will always shorten. So the price will always get shorter. So we're beating the book, and that's all you've got to do. If you look at what price the odds you bet something at the start of the event, if they're shorter in 4 days' time when the event starts, ultimately you'll win, because you're taking a percentage off the book. And that, in this country, is what the bookmakers don't like. They don't like you betting a horse that's 5-1 that even if it doesn't win and it starts 2-1, they look at your account and think this guy should warm. This is sharp money because that odds have come down so low. And I think that's what we do. And now with the following, we have so much money volume going into the market that we actually we move the price, especially on the lower leagues. And I think if we can keep taking those little margins, that's how you make money long term.
Sure, absolutely. That's great information. And so for the people out there who are trying to bet on sports or want to be an odds maker or something like that professionally, what would you say the best way to either get into the business behind the counter or to really become a professional handicapper sports bettor?
Well, I think one thing as a sports bettor, it's a very lonely business. If you're wrong, it's you. It's your fault. So you go for a walk, you go down the pub, you do whatever you do. You go to the gym, you take it out on a punch bag. But you're on your own. It's your decision. There's no one else to blame. It's your fault. If you have a win, it's still always lonely because you're feeling top of the world and you want to tell everyone, but there's no one there to pat you on the back and say, "Well done." It's just you. So it's quite a lonely business. You've got to look at the long term. I think if you're going into betting, if you go back to what I said earlier, if you bet and take the price and they get a bit of price, you can have losing runs, but long term you'll win. That's why I never ever offer anybody a weekly package or a monthly package on what I do, the service I provide, because anybody can have a bad week, anybody can have a bad month, and it's not worth it. It's a long game. But if you don't make money on the season, and you want to do programming, and you're doing 9 months of records, and you're not making money, then you need to probably do something else. So that's what the long term picture is. I think we react. The human reacts to results. He'll go ups and downs. It's a roller coaster ride, but it's the long term. If the long term figure is positive at the end of 9 months, you're doing something. There's probably 1% of people in the UK, probably in America as well, who make money gambling. The 99% of them will be minus. The 1 or 2% are in positive. And if you're making money, you've got a future in this game. So I would take that out. The other thing I think is huge, another thing is, I haven't, over my years, I've had a very good circle of people. I have experts who I talk to. Now, I speak to them about the football, I speak to them about the golf, I speak to them about the tennis. I have people who I respect hugely over 20 years who I've met who are fellow pro gamblers. And I think there's much information and listening to other people's minds. And, you talk about a game and they'll say, yeah, I like that game. And they give the reason and they turn around and say, oh, well, that player's not playing and his record without that player is set. And my dad said to me once, many years ago, he said, in the betting industry, he said, and I've used this on VSiN again, it's be a judge of judges. There are so many people who think they are judges. You can meet a guy in the club, oh, I bet so many winners, I'm so good. But it's spotting the one in the crowd that's the judge. And if you have good people around you, good quality people, you can call on about tennis, second opinion on the boxing, a guy who knows about horse racing. If you have good quality of people around you, then you'll be okay. Because however good you are, there's always someone better than you. And that's one thing I've learned. However good you are, there's other people that know a little bit more than you and a little bit more than you. But having good people around you is really, really, really key for me. And that takes a long time. That could take 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer to find those good people. But when you've got good people around you, keep them there, because the more opinions you've got and the more sharp opinions telling you what your opinion was right originally, that's good, especially if you're going through a bad run. Because if you're going through a bad run, which I had a terrible run on the soccer just before Christmas, terrible run, and you doubt yourself. Even if you've done it you think, oh, I'm wrong here. But if you have good people around you say, no, you're absolutely right, this is a great play, I agree with that, that's really, really invaluable.
Great advice and great information from Nigel Seeley. Nigel, thanks for coming on. We hope to have you again.
No problem. Have a great week.
Thank you.